Well, the audio is coming through my laptop speakers, but I'm just not going to worry about that. So I'm Jessica Sharp. Not going to say where I work. I've been a consultant my entire career. Today, actually, is my 1-year anniversary of not consultant work. And I feel like a consultant. I'm definitely like, okay, what else is out there? I've done Postgres through all the pandemic, plus a couple of years. So however long that is, I don't know, feels like 10 to me, but did Oracle before this. So part of this is coming from a very experienced Oracle DBA, used to the very streamlined Oracle, RMAN is wonderful. And then having to work around the modularity of Postgres with it, you've got so many different options and ways to do backups. And then the reason that I say I was a consultant and am not now is this is why I'm entering this phase of my discovery so late in my 10-year career, because as a consultant, you're in and out to solve very specific problems or do risk assessments and suggest projects and sometimes stay on to do those projects. The long haul issues are for the in-house DBAs, which is where you have to actually know your backups so that you can do a recovery. And you're the one that gets called, not your consultant, I hope, because consultants are expensive. So during this past 1 year, I went on, and obviously backups were one of the first questions I had, do we have backups? How do they work? And yes, I do ask every customer I have, do you have backups? Because I've made a lot of money building backups and recovery strategies for people who didn't have backups. So it's a thing. Thankfully, this environment did. And, I asked other basic questions, show me your monitoring situation, show me day to day. And because I wasn't a consultant anymore, I had daily things being thrown at me and support requests. And I was working a lot closer with developers than I had in the past. Most of my work with developers in the past was, okay, we're migrating you from Oracle to Postgres. You need to rewrite your code. Let's sit down and pair on this, or I'll just rewrite it for you, extra fee. So recently, particularly over the past 6 months, where I've gotten kind of some of the support requests, the volume is a little bit less, and I've been focusing on more like, okay, well, you know what? I lost a couple of nights of sleep because I realized that during the previous 6 months, I've not personally tested a backup. So I know they're out there, but Schrodinger's backup, right? Like things go wrong. So I started testing the backups, and I started looking at our backup strategy, and this is why we're here. So I am breaking all of my normal presentation rules. So I apologize if this goes very wrong. I've always refused to do demos, but when I got to putting this together, sitting here slide after slide after slide didn't make sense because it deferred, number one, because it deferred with my hands-on experience testing these backups. Stuff that I've pulled out of the Postgres documentation wasn't exactly, I think I had thought of a nice way to say this afternoon and promptly forgot it on the drive over. The documentation is great for high-level details. It's not detailed enough. Test your backups. Like, please, 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 please. I have lost so much sleep because I waited so long to test my backups. So like any good DBA, start with the internet. Okay, way too many backup options, way too many recovery options floating around on people's blogs. And everything is kind of custom to people's environments, right? That's a nice thing and a frustrating thing about Postgres is their stereotypical DBA answer, like it depends on your databases. So we're going to actually walk through examples of recovering the 3 main ways that it says in the Postgres documentation that you do backups and recoveries from, because understanding these is what I've learned. Really, the frustrating way is really critical to make sure you really understand these basic things before you move on to things like cloud backups and or using other tools like Barman. You've got to understand this fundamental stuff. And I will tell you about a recent recovery I had to do that went very wrong from my own opinion, but I did get the data back. So yep. And on the way over here, I didn't save I had a cheat sheet with my commands. Another, violation of presentation law. If you're going to do demos, save your commands. Well, I didn't save that file, so we're going to be going by hand in memory here. Some of it's in my history, so I'll open up a cheat sheet. The first way, and I can kind of understand why it's ordered this way in the documentation. The first method for doing backups that they give us in chapter 25 in the docs is Sql Dumps, and that's the phrase they use. They don't say PG dump, they say Sql dump. If you've been in DBA for a while, it sounds like everybody has. That sounds like, okay, a SQL file with everything I need in it. With Postgres, in this case, the default here is not to do inserts, updates, it's to actually copy, you have a copy table in there. If you run it a specific way, check the documentation, check your options, you can actually do inserts and updates instead of that, which it did some testing on some larger databases, and I couldn't quite nail down a consistent answer as to which way is faster. But I will tell you, I will not ever want to be in a position where I'm relying on a SQL dump to restore a whole database from scratch if that database is larger than like a gigabyte. Does anybody have one smaller than that? Because I didn't. So SQL dumps rely on PG dump or PG dump all. PG dump all grabs your whole cluster. And like I said, I really hope I would never find myself in a situation where that's the only backup I have to recover from, and I do have to recover the whole cluster. So I'm not even going to go there today, but I'm going to show you basic on how SQL dumps work. PG dumps, sorry. I want to show how to restore a whole database, not a cluster. This is just one database that I've backed up because it can be handy. I won't recommend doing it that way, but I will recommend the same strategy for maybe restoring a table or maybe moving a table if it's slightly too big for a CSV, or my cloud recovery story where I really was going to be in a bad situation if I didn't have PG dump available to me. So first thing I want to do is make sure I even have my backup. All right, and we do. Another thing to note here, we're only looking at the first one. I've not cleaned up from my exercises this afternoon. So the DVD rental origin dump. I know here I need to move over a database, and this database is called DVD rental. And let's say that I either ran this dump a really long time ago, but it doesn't matter, or somebody else ran this dump and handed it to me and said, hey, restore this database. What I need to keep in mind here is that this database, and I love the Postgres wording around this, point in time recovery, is technically under a lot of, like, if you look at the Barman documentation, they refer to a lot of things as point in time recovery. And I've been practicing, and it's, yeah, you can recover to a point in time, but maybe not at the granularity you want. This is definitely one of those cases where I could totally argue, just to cover my butt and be a knucklehead, this is a point in time recovery. I'm recovering to 301. Okay, but I want 305. Well, that point in time is not an option for you. So keep that in mind, that this is never going to be a strategy if that's the level of granularity that you need. But if I talked to the person that sent this request and said, hey, is 301 okay? Yeah, we're good. Okay, cool. I will go ahead and restore this in. So because it's a .sql file, I'm going to use pSQL to run this file just as a normal SQL file, or as a normal SQL script. If this were compressed, I'm going to show you something really fun that had me really stressed today, and I blasted on Twitter and made an idiot of myself because I was this frustrated with it. But if it's not .sql, then we can't use pSQL. We have to use something called PG restore, but I know this one works. So we're going to do this. We're just going to say, hey, PSQL, well, let's see if anybody can catch this. Okay, so this is all I'm going to say. I'm just going to specify what, that works a little different than my mouse. Okay, here's the file that I want to run. And that's it. A room full of DBAs. We all good with this? Is everybody online good with this?
Host name, user, database name, where you want to go.
Yeah. At minimum, you need database name and host name. This is set up to only connect to my local, which here is fine. But I do want to say that I want to run this as the Postgres user, and I do want to say, please run this as, or connect, if I can type and talk at the same time. I want this to connect to the DVD rental database and restore this there. Not knowing anything else about this dump file, which a lot of times if there's like a fire, you're not necessarily going to go investigate the crap out of your dump file here. We'll probably get it here, maybe not. I guess I could add in host and port, but in this case, it's going to be pretty simple. Oh, and I'm going to move my -F just because that's going to bother me. I actually may get an HBA error on this because this is a brand new Postgres install. 5432, and then add in. All right, people are breathing down my neck to get this restored. I'm going to run it. Oh, shit, I didn't change that password. All right, well, pretend I did. I'm taking that out. And I promise that what we're going to see is not because this isn't in there. No. It's in the PG pass. I'm just really, come on. Okay then, excuse me. All right. I forgot to drop that database. Oh my gosh. Okay. I was very upset during my afternoon rehearsal, as we can clearly see. All right, let's do that again. Yeah. I didn't know anything about this dump. This is on purpose. I didn't know anything about this dump when I ran, well, in this case, I did it, but when this dump was created, it was basically just PG dump, here's the database name, here's where I want you to put it, here's the file name that I want. That's it. I didn't tell it to include the command to create the dang database if it doesn't exist. So not the best situation because when I do restore this, I'm not going to have restored any users or object permissions. There are a few other flags that you can use to catch some of that, but again, like refer to the options in the documentation. So I'm just going to say create database, DVD rental. All right, we're going to run it again. We are going to hit another issue. I promise, because I built it this way. Okay, looks like we're done, right? Looks like we're good. So in this hypothetical situation where I have now just done this recovery, I'm going to go back to the person that requested this and I'm going to say, all right, you're good. Log in, please. And they're going to come back to me in probably about 5 minutes. And then I'm going to be kind of embarrassed because I log into the database here and I'm in the Postgres database. If I pull that over, do that again so we can all see it. Okay, so the owner of the DVD rental database here is Postgres. Well, that wasn't the case in my source. And if I start scrolling through when this ran, I can start seeing that. So it's complaining that this role does not exist. Hope you don't run into this in production. I hope this, test your backups. So what we can do to get around this is create that role, and and assuming that you're loading this into a fresh database, which I think we don't realize that that's actually the recovery strategy until it's time to do the recovery. I've had more than one recently where I just thought, okay, I'll just put it back into the database. No, I have to go put it on another server, and then object permissions are all screwed up, and I have to fix it before I copy that back into the original. Say, like if I just dropped a table or something, I could have copied that table out from here because I don't want to copy the whole thing back into the other one because I only need one table. I'm going to lose data and everything else. And I'll say you're good to go, and somebody's going to say, no, I'm not, because it's the default ownership. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. And I'm going to cheat. I'm just going to say, don't do this in production. I'm going to create that with super user. Whatever, nobody cares, right? And then I'm just, well, because it's super user, I don't need to grant Postgres, but normally that would be a thing. So okay. What I can do, and I'm just opening this for myself to get back into my history. This is where, not saving your command thing comes back to haunt you. Oh. I do want a backup of this where it has the create command, because for just this one, I actually prefer doing it that way, but okay. What we're gonna do, this is too far back. My frustration becomes visible if you can see the bottom of the screen here. pgdump Postgres. This is the one I want. Okay. Something that becomes really obvious as a problem right away here. When we're thinking about, okay, well, this database, I promise, is really small. This you can download on the internet, so it's, it's tiny. If you're working with any sort of substantial amount of test data, though, say you're actually trying to test this on something near your production environment, you're not going to want that big of a SQL file laying around. You're going to want to compress. So here's where my frustration has happened. We're just going to do this. I don't have an actual answer yet on this, but and again, I only copy and paste. Might make me actually copy out this one. That's rude. Okay, I'll type it. That's fine. Database, DVD rental. There are a few different compression options. You can use tar, you can use gzip. What I've been working with, what I've been testing personally lately is gzip. So I'm going to go ahead and do that for this example. And then I'm just going to say send, do the PG dump. I only want DVD rental. I almost forgot again. But what I do want, I want this thing to create the command to create the database. So I'm going to say uppercase -C, have that one memorized, thankfully. And then I know my backups directory. Yep. Why is it doing that? Oh, okay, I had to zoom out, sorry. And then we're going to call this DVD rental. I'm going to throw the date in there. .sql, and it's zipped. I'll just type that in. Nothing to see here. It was fast because that database is small. Anything bigger than that, that's going to take a while. This is why you should have these things pre-typed. Yeah, there was a typo there, which is fine. I'm just going to go fix that. Should be uppercase F. My bad. There it is with the nice date included. So it has SQL in there in the file type, but it says gz.gz. So according to the documentation, we should not be able to use pSQL to do this restore the same way we did with the other PG dump file. According to the documentation and various blogs, we should have to use PG restore. I'm just going to say this right now. We're going to do it. I'm going to share my frustration. I really wish I had saved that stupid file. Maybe that's why it didn't work. Maybe that's why it didn't work. I might have just figured out. No, because I did it down here too. All right. Looks like I tried this a few ways. I forgot. I'm just going to say PG restore database that I want to connect to is DVD rental. I do want to drop that database though, so. And hopefully that's not the situation that you're recovering from, but I've had it happen, so. And again, which I expect, so I probably should be truncating this instead. It's fine. Okay, created, do it again. Huh. I'll explain my confusion. So that wasn't supposed to work. I mean, it was supposed to work, but it also wasn't supposed to work. Okay, I'm into Postgres. I'm going to list the databases. DVD rental database is there. Connect to DVD rental. Let's look at the tables. Let's see what's there. That's crazy. It's all there. It restored. Holy crap. I'm not kidding when I say I fought with this for 2 hours because it was just hanging. It wasn't restoring. And I was really ready to feel like PG restore sucks. And now it works. Okay, well, need some coffee after that. I have an apology on Twitter to make. All right, we're gonna blow this away. again, that worked. That was cool. I will sleep a little bit better tonight. Oh, just kidding. I do want to drop it again. Well, okay. So that gets us through actually all of the SQL dump options. Really, at the heart of it, everything else is an expansion from there. The second kind of section in the documentation for backups is file system level backups. What it took me far too long to realize was that the EPG-based backup utility is literally just this. This falls under this category, and it's not listed out necessarily that way in the documentation, but once we start playing with it, yeah, it is. So let's do it. And to appease the demo gods, I'm gonna make sure, let's see, PG base backups. Have one in there. Yeah, we're just gonna use it. It's fine. So I've done a PG-based backup of this. What I don't have, so this database is completely fresh. This is the default parameters, and I did this on purpose to make a point later about the cloud stuff. I've literally not changed a single setting on this database, except for create that user, the J# user, and add this database in. I haven't changed anything else. So I'm gonna go ahead and I'm going to wipe out the data directory. And unfortunately, that is a necessary step for recovering from a PG-based backup. I'm not quite sure how Barman gets around it, but okay, we're gonna exit out of this user, sudo rm. I'm gonna take my time on this because I have to type it out and I don't wanna blow away all my root directory or something. See, that's why. Lib PGSQL. Yes, PGSQL. Okay. 13. I may be having some lag here because it's not auto completing. I wouldn't recommend, if you do have to do a recovery, I wouldn't recommend trying to memorize the data path like this. Go into the database if you still can and do a show data directory. So you make sure you're getting rid of the right thing. Have actually made that mistake as well before. Okay, so should be gone now. Yep, it's gone. I really can type. Data directory is gone. Phone calls are probably starting to happen. Don't panic, it's okay. My very crude, I do not want to type this one out. This one, my copy commands always go silly when I try and type them live. Oh, it's gonna make me. That's nice. Yeah, it's gonna make me. All right, that's fine. I'm gonna do it on the bottom because I can use sudo from this user. Didn't set that up correctly for the Postgres user, which is fine. Don't necessarily want Postgres to be able to sudo to root. Okay, let's get back into the backups directory and back into where I kept my base backups. Okay, so copy that recursively into where I know the data directory should be. Did it on this screen because I needed sudo and then I forgot to sudo. Too easy, too easy. It's the cynic in me talking, don't worry about it. I don't feel like actually making this mistake, but I did think about it. So Permission denied on both accounts. I wasn't planning on making that mistake, and then I did it anyway. Root owns it because I sudoed to copy it. And this, don't copy if you have a real recovery, people breathing down your neck, use tar or something. But in this case, this base backup was not compressed, which also I don't recommend doing. I'm getting about a 9 to 10 times compression ratio or rate on my actual backups in production, as well as for the compressed dumps. And yes, I'm relying on dumps. But in this case, it just didn't make sense. So just gonna give it back to Postgres for lib SQL 13. Okay, now we should be able to confirm everything is in there. When I created this was not necessarily just me going in and saying, hey, tar this directory. I actually used the PG base backup command, which you can see there are some weird files in here. There's one called backup label old, backup manifest. I prefer using PG base backup to do file system level backups because it creates these for me. So if you were to do a point in time recovery or anything like that, this backup label is actually very helpful. Here's why. It's a directory, sorry. Where am I? Why can't I? I'm not in the data directory. That's what happened. Am I still connected to Zoom?
Yeah, just let me see your wife. You're still
okay. Okay, so it shows me the wall location at the start time of PG base backup that was ran. That's actually really important, as well as the checkpoint location. And while I was running this, because this database has obviously next to no activity in it, because it's just me, PG base backup was just sitting there. It was just sitting there. And I was like, why is this hanging? This can't be. And then I realized, oh, there's no activity, so it's not doing any checkpoints. So it just manually did a checkpoint. A little trick if your PG base backup is taking too long and you don't have the traffic to justify it or the size of the database to justify it, just manually checkpoint it. And it finishes and tells you exactly where the checkpoint was. And if you took this backup from a standby or a master, and in this case, it was the master, PG base backup is my very descriptive custom label. Do whatever you want there. It's more handy if you have more than one backup. But that's just a tag that you would pass through the PG base backup command. Okay, so I recovered my stuff. I should be good to go, right? Nope. So obvious, like if you're in a meeting and discussing backup strategies and, oh, it's fine, we've got PG base backups running. Yeah, but a recovery requires downtime. So I'm just going to go in and restart my database here. Also another note, I tried just starting, not restarting. And it wasn't exactly finding all of the little custom, like the config directory and the source code. It was blowing up on some weird stuff. And I was frustrated and just did a restart and it worked. So I recommend restarting, not starting. Sudo. Gotta run that as root. Okay, I'm in. Is my DVD rentals database still there? Yes. And I didn't truncate, so I do just want to see though. Yep. Okay, this is fine for this database. I don't have any activity. I have the default configs. I think it's whatever, it's fine probably. The second I start pointing any activity towards this thing without changing these configs in my backup strategy, and this is where you see this in the cloud, yay, Amazon. Still got a lot of RDS instances running off of the default parameters, and it's
not going to block base backups because Amazon's managing this, right? But if you did need to, and well, I should probably just tell that story a little ahead of schedule because it fits, but this only grabbed the physical data files. If any activity had come in while I was running that base backup, well, with Postgres, with the multi-version concurrency control, that goes into the walls. I didn't capture the walls. I'm not archiving walls. I didn't apply any walls. So yes, this might have looked like I just recovered my database. I didn't. Had anybody been connected to it and doing anything? That's a whole other, that's where the documentation branches into the third section, which is actual point in time recovery. And then they reference, hey, this is also continuous archiving, which is how you want to set this up. You want to make sure that the differences are going to be, your base backup is still going to apply. You need a base backup to do a point in time recovery. You're still rebuilding your database. For zero downtime recovery, you can rebuild this to a different server. Don't blow away your master data directory. Either build a fresh one somewhere else and copy over the config, or well, hopefully your backup is copying your config correctly. Hopefully you don't need to make any adjustments. Rebuild over there and then apply the walls. This is where you go through that process, even if it's not you manually doing it, even if it's what I'm going to explain in a second, you've still got to give the database time to do this. And then you can point the traffic over and promote that one. But what you'll need is, in order to having your walls archived and streaming on, because base backup runs through application slots weirdly, but you'll also need, this is why you also need base backup, because you need the backup log, or the file that we looked at earlier that was kind of randomly in there. You're like, oh, I didn't think it made anything, but it does. You also need a recovery file with a restore command. And what that restore command is going to do, and this is where I emphasize, like, test this, because I tried copying and pasting out of the documentation. And again, it went horribly wrong. And so I decided to leave it out of the demo because 2 fails, granted, that one didn't fail. I thought it would, and it didn't. 2 fails would have been too much for me to handle in one day. So what that restore command is going to do is it's going to point you to where your walls are archived for the sake of the backup. That may not necessarily be your primary. This is where you can split it and customize it however you want. But it's going to know, okay, I've got to apply the base backup and then bring in those walls. So if they're not archived, or if they're not in that directory where you said, it might look like a complete recovery, but unless you're checking the LSNs, you may actually miss something. So watch out for that. Barman uses PG-based backup under the hood. I'm not sure how I feel about Barman right now, and I'll be honest, it's probably user error, but their wording on their documentation is a little bit confusing for someone who especially was in Oracle for so long. A full backup to me, this is a full backup to me. Even if I have continuous archiving, I might kind of argue against that if I have any replication lag or anything like that. I would not feel comfortable going to stakeholders saying, yes, I can do a point in time recovery with this. I can do one specific timestamp, but I'm not going to run a PG-based backup every 15 minutes. Sometimes this is okay for databases. Right now, I have a lot that this isn't. So I got to look at something like Barman, which says, hey, we can do incrementals also. And hey, you can do point in time recovery. Cool. Which possibly, yes. But when you're going through the configuration, you get your full backups, right? That seems pretty straightforward. And so far it has been. The incrementals is where it gets kind of hairy. What I'm seeing, and I can't show that because I couldn't set it up fast enough between support requests and etc. You would think, okay, so incremental is going to go in and grab walls, right? That, depending on the size of your walls and how much you've got going on there, that could be a big deal. It could not. Again, really depends on your database. we started with our most critical databases that were running on EC2. Everything else was in RDS or Aurora, and we figured, okay, well, we've got daily snapshots going, which theoretically you can recover at, I think our granularity is like a minute. So down to the minute at any time, you can do an RDS or Aurora recovery, just out of the box, standard. With our EC2 databases, we were kind of nervous about this. So put in Barman. We started with one of our smaller critical ones, took a copy of it, decompressed. Oh no, sorry, that was the other production database. Okay. So I've forgotten the sizes on this actually. I think it was 42, 43 gigabytes for the initial base backup. And I should have double checked walls before I came. But for a 40 gig base backup, this thing runs for 6 hours taking the backup on a read-only database. And so we thought, okay, that's kind of painful. But it is what it is at this stage. You know, we've got some tuning to do, but we just need backups. So let's go ahead and set up the incrementals to go. And we did. We have daily incrementals, and it's taking the same amount of time to do this. It's taking 6 hours for each incremental. And then when we got into it, we started examining the file contents of these backups. We looked at it and we said, it's taking a base backup every time it does what we think is an incremental. So I'm not quite sure anymore what the difference with Barman, an incremental and a full backup is. And this question was posed to the Barman team, and we were told that yes, that's correct. However, in the past, I've been told, oh, that was another detail. We are using, there's a parameter in there where you can say, hey, don't do the full base backup, just link back to what's changed. And this may be where we're getting in trouble. It may genuinely be that this much has changed between each incremental. We may need to tighten the schedule on this. That's supposed to save space, because then at that point, you're in theory only backing up your walls, your archived walls. We haven't honestly been able to, that's a work in progress. So, and at this point in this is a team journey, right? This isn't just me, although I'm probably the most vocal one about it at this point. We thought, okay, well, we need a backup. We need a backup. If this thing goes down, like, I'm not going to have a good day. So let's just move forward and let's at least make sure that what we've got, we can recover from. 6 hours to recover the same thing on a 40 gigabyte database. Unacceptable, right? So I'm not very happy with the way Barman works right now as it's configured in the environment. I've been testing it on. Something I did see in the documentation was there is a third kind of category of backup with Barman, and this is your differentials. And that is, I was hoping to have it tested by the time I did this presentation, but I decided I was going to go on this journey a while ago, and that's still a pending to do. So I may do a blog post or something about that. So Barman, I don't know, maybe I'm just using it wrong. Last Monday, yeah, I was on call last week. My on-call rotation starts at 10 a.m. and ends at 10 a.m. the following Monday. At 9:45-ish, I get pinged from a developer. Hey, I work with this team quite regularly. They're one of my, like, hey, I know your databases really well at this point. I've been in and out, and they've been my focus for 6 months now. Hey, is this database down? And I'm that early in the morning, I'm not far enough through my coffee cycles to, like, you know, and I'm going, all right, let me check the alerts. No, okay, let me run to my desk. Hang on, dude. Got to my desk, database is up. So jump on a Zoom with him. We fire up an incident. We don't know what's going on. We just know that the application thinks the database is down. So we're possibly losing data and need to figure out what the heck. About 2 seconds after seeing the application log. And this is, if you're going to use RDS, don't leave the default parameters alone, because I had standard logging, so it wasn't really helpful as far as the database logs. But the application log said something along the lines of like trying to hit this table, and it was just missing this table. It couldn't find this table, and so it was actually timing out, and that's why they were asking me if the database was down. But I was looking at it and I said, well, why can't it hit that table? So we're probably about 10:15 a.m. at this point. You know, everybody's, oh, are we up? Are we up? Yeah, we're up, but I think we're missing a table. Let me see what happened. It was a table I had dropped the Thursday before on purpose. I was doing migrations, and I had the public schema from the source database wasn't supposed to go into the public schema in the target database, and I made a mistake with my migration, and it did. And I didn't realize there were actually supposed to be any tables in the public schema on my target. So I just wiped out the whole public schema, and I said their tables should be in their respective schemas for this code. That wasn't the case. There was one table that was legitimate and was supposed to be there. So at this point, I'm thinking, well, great, I've got RDS snapshots enabled and we're saving 2 weeks for this. Time to test that point in time recovery. This is where I realized I had another problem. I had deleted this table on a Thursday afternoon. This was Monday morning that we were finding out it wasn't there. I cannot, at this point, I had to figure out how I was going to handle this, because at that point, I could not just do a restore of the entire database all the way back to Thursday. We were going to lose data. We were going to lose changes that had come in over the weekend on all the other tables. So test your backups, because this was about this. I think by definition, this was a 4-day outage. Technically, it was a 3-hour recovery for one table that was 6,000 rows. 3 hours, because I had never tested my RDS backups and snapshots. The complication here was that, and I knew this, but again, like haven't had coffee, didn't have clear documented notes for myself on how to do this, and hadn't tested it. So I didn't have any painful experience to look back on and say, oh yeah, don't do that again. I restored the snapshot, and with RDS, it restores that. It does what I've done here under the hood, creates a new database instance, copies your snapshot. It's a whole dump of the database. I don't know if it's a Sql dump or a base backup, I don't really care. And I thought, okay, well, great. Now I've got to get just that table out and put it back in the other one. And this is where I needed Sql dump. I needed to use PG dump for just that table. Fought for 2 hours because I had lots of AWS permissions issues, couldn't write out to S3, had to figure out how to get this thing off of an RDS instance onto my local machine. And then I remembered, oh yeah, I have PG dump installed locally on my laptop, and it's only 6,000 rows, so I'll just dump it directly locally. Had this been a bigger table, let's say one of my ones that has many millions of rows, I probably would have had a much worse Monday morning than I did. And I just generated the SQL file with pSQL, did up back to the source, the original database, and we were good to go. But like I said, test your freaking backups, because I was not expecting to hit an AWS permissions error and not be able to push this thing out to S3 to copy back over to the other server. I wasn't really prepared to copy just a specific table using PG dump. Just, you know, I was thinking that if I had to recover, it was going to be an entire database or nothing. No, get a DBA friend. I'll be that friend if I have to, because now I'm really good at breaking databases. Had a lot of outages this past month or so. And have them just troll you and make up situations and put the pressure on and give them access to your database, have them go delete things, drop things, get rid of backups, and see what these are before you're in a situation where it really is embarrassing and matters. So that's, yeah, it's a lot, but if you understand those three things really well, I feel like now that I dug deeper in and have been testing the heck out of everything, I feel like I would have realized that AWS snapshot thing was going to bite me a lot sooner than it did. And thankfully I got through it, but you know, and to be determined, my point in time recovery strategy for my non-RDS instances still kind of floating out there. So please don't rely on those snapshots for backups. Have another strategy, because this whole thing, this restore, just to get the standby instance up with the recovered data, to pull out one table took me 20 minutes. My console is slow. My team tells me that they can do this in like 5. I don't know, but I wasn't very happy about it. So any questions?
Yeah, was the slowness mainly related to your permission issue, or was it actually just slow to restore?
Nothing about the restore was actually slow, except for jumping through all the little steps and hitting all the little permissions issues and all the little, oh, I can't put it here because this is already, you know, all those things just added up, and it turned into a 2-hour fiasco. Plus, to get past those permissions issues, I had to page the site reliability engineers who manage that and wait for them to get on a Zoom, because, you know, they're like, you're a DBA, you should have these permissions already. And I'm like, no, I really don't. Please, you know, it was, the actual recovery process was not bad, aside from creating that new instance. For whatever reason, Amazon took 20 minutes on it. It's maybe 50 gigabyte database. So.
Have you retested now your RDS snapshot?
Yeah. Still can't do S3 though. I haven't solved a lot of these things. It's just happened last Monday. So if I have to recover a small table, okay, but I don't have, something I don't have is I don't have logging enabled properly. So I got lucky that I'm the one that dropped this table, because right away I knew, and I was like, oh, and I knew when I dropped it because I did it on purpose. It wasn't an accident. I mean, it was an accident, but it wasn't an accident. So I knew when to go back to. Had this not been me, or had I been up in the mountains and the previous on-call person gotten this, they wouldn't have known when to restore to. They wouldn't have known, because my logging is all on default. There's no, no statement logging, no DDL monitoring, no nothing. And that's not to say security probably could have pulled that out somewhere, but it would have been not very fun. So yeah. And if I have to restore a bigger database, I don't know what I'm going to do right now.
So on RDS, do you have a multi-AC setup?
On that particular one, some of mine are. On that one it is, but if I had failed over to the other one, I mean, it was in sync. So yeah, because I had deleted this thing on a Thursday and nobody knew until Monday.
So I don't think we have restored from backup for many years here. Is AWS as reliable, or do you have server issues with?
You mean restoring an RDS snapshot? Is it reliable?
Yes. Is it as reliable as a VMware?
We did it all the time in the last place. I did one last week here. So yeah, it's super slow if you do like from times.
Yeah.
But if you do it from a snapshot, like, oh, I know it was before this date. Last full snapshot was last night.
Yeah, what Jessica's saying is it did that part fine. Yes,
Yeah.
It set up the standby.
But test it, because you might run into some weird like stuff that I can't even predict.
It's the process after. In other words,
Yeah.
It's the process after. I've had the same experience on RDS with AWS. If I have an RDS and I say restore to this, it'll restore it. It'll give me that other thing. But yeah, there may be permissions issues. You may not have, that, especially when you're dealing with, you're a database person and your sysadmins may have a completely different set of permissions, to keep those things segmented. When it comes up, it might not have any of those things.
Yeah.
That's why you need to test the process.
Well, I think I still don't have S3 access. And if I need to restore something bigger than 6,000 rows, there's no way I'm going to be able to pull it locally to my laptop. I'm going to have to push that directly out to S3. And I didn't know that until I hit that never thought I did have access because I'm a DBA. Why would I
We
have
found
access?
making a reasons for a restore was great. So we forced a restore every quarter for regression testing. So we actually restored the database. We fired up an app layer so they could regression test our code against previous releases, validated our database and everything in Snapshot. So
It's a good idea.
and
Yeah.
that was driven by our QA team. So if you can find a good way to force yourself to do it, then DR testing kind of helps. But
I think this was my way to force it.
was it?
I'm not going to do this on one of my bigger, more serious databases, but like I've lost a lot of sleep over the past week because I have now that I've tested things and been in the hot seat and then gone back and tested all of this on my own, even at the fundamental basic level. Now I'm seeing flaws and I'm going, oh, yep. Yeah, so by default, your logging is none. You're not logging any DDL, any SQL statements or anything. You have to actually change that in your parameter groups. And you don't want to be doing that right before you need it because you have to restart your database. So
Is that through PGI or just
yeah.
RDS?
No, it's just like in the normal, just the log statement level. Yeah, I don't have that set to none. I think, well, and I can actually show you by default because this, I don't know. I really can type log statements, or is it PG's? It's just log statements.
Show space log tab. Statement OS.
None by default. So this is an EC2 instance, but I guarantee that's the same. And if I spun up an RDS one, I can show you the same thing.
You said that incremental backup for the EC2 Postgres instance. Have you considered using EBS backup instead of using the whatever tool that you're using?
Barman. We have not looked into that yet, and probably worth it based on the responses that we just the issues that we've had with Barman. I think the answer from the team right now is no, let's just push to get these off of EC2 and move to Aurora. I don't know that I like that. I don't know that I agree with that, but that's the decision at the moment. So that may be something that I explore on my own for other clients I take on as I get back into consulting.
So who has experience doing using the backup service?
Yeah.
Is that backup?
Oh, the EDS backup.
Yeah. That's
So we did research EBS backup a little bit
before my time.
but yeah, but the biggest concern we had was how does it do on snapshotting while data is in transition? In other words, like base backup and everything else, just like you stated, Jessica, base backup knows that I started running at this time and it takes a checkpoint essentially, and it knows that. And EBS volume says I'm taking a snapshot or I'm taking the data of this volume wherever it is. And that's not necessarily connected to what the wall is doing, what transactions are going through, everything else. Now, maybe Amazon has that hook in there, but that's what we were questioning. It doesn't have that hook in there because you're literally snapshotting as it's kind of visually moving in front of you. So you have to be careful with EBS because if somebody says, well, I can restore to this point, but was that in the middle of a transaction? Was that after a transaction? Where was that? What does that look like? You know, what is that? And Postgres will correct itself because it's ACID compliant. It has when you restore it, but that doesn't mean that you know where it is. It doesn't mean you know exactly what transaction it's stopped on. So that's where you have to be a little careful when you're talking about the EBS backup on EC2. It's not a bad idea for because it is very fast, this way Amazon does it, just a snapshot, a pointer in time sort of thing. So it's not a bad idea to have it there as a safety. But again, I would say if Jessica was in that same situation and somebody said, well, we've got an EBS backup to restore, that'd be hard.
Yeah.
That would be a pain. You know, you'd have to present another server, attach it to that server, and then say, go and look at that data and look at that database and see what you got. Yeah, it would be definitely a big question.
Yeah, current backups are very custom that we created. We'll work with AWS professionals, and I know they're not help us.
Oh yeah.
Well, that's why test it. Even if it's not like the actual environment, get as close as you can and test it, because it's always supposed to work one way. And you're like, oh, this little weird caveat.
I mean, it's really easy to test for an EBS or something else. Throw a bench at it, get a tiny little database, snapshot of EBS, drop it, put it onto another system and see what it looks like and see what you got.
Yeah.
I mean, it's really easy to find out. It's just, yes, every AWS, I mean, people have been telling us since the SANs have been a thing that they can take a snapshot of that volume and it'll be completely connected and restorable. Yeah. I can't tell you how many SAN storage vendors have told me that over the years and how many times I've said, sure it is.
Yeah.
You know, so I agree. Test what you're doing.
Yeah. Do you have another question or are you stretching?
Yeah, do we have a way to restore it if we don't have it back?
I hope you have a standby. But that gets more into high availability rather than necessarily, you know, and that's the whole database, which what I recently learned, because that was my way of thinking was, oh, I need to restore a whole database. And now I'm hitting all these situations where, yeah, actually restoring the whole database would cause more problems than it fixes. So
we have in our queue, we have a request to restore individual tables. You know, one of the applications do something up, so they need just a few tables or a table to be restored on a specific day.
Yeah, the only way to do that is with PG dump, and that's only if you're already running PG dump against specific tables. Otherwise,
completely separate.
Yeah, which is such a waste of space. That's like one of my trade-offs. Is I got kind of frustrated with Postgres the more I got into this, because I was like, oh, in Oracle, I could do this, but it's just something to think about. I would say just put more checks in place, put more auditing in place, prevent access if people don't need access. You just prevent that fire before you're in it, probably as best as you can. But I mean, it happens. You know, sometimes it's the DBA that drops the table.
You can do it in SQL Server too, but you know that's not possible. But
yeah, yeah.
I will mention that.
Right.
All right, real quick, I'm going to stop the recording so we can still ask questions. But I'm going to stop.
Cool.